do want to talk about this PBC sort of buyout, and we're going to have to sort of break this down a little bit to better explain it. And again, go check out the podcast, the Boxing Esquire podcast with Kurt Emhoff and John Nash. They're the ones that broke this down in depth. I really trust these guys when it comes to their credibility, what they know, their sources in the industry. These are guys you can trust. And they basically said to the point that the buyout of PBC by WME, and WME, Willius Morris, Endeavor are the owners, the majority owners of the UFC. For those that don't know, that's why this has been sort of talked about as UFC buying out PBC. That's not really innately true. It's WME buying out PBC, or at least part of PBC. They allege that, and they hear from multiple sources different things. One thing they hear is that the buyout will only be Waddell and Reed's portion of Haymon Sports LLC and PBC, and not Haymon individually, not PBC as a whole, just Waddell and Reed, and then become basically a majority owner or at least investor or stakeholder of those companies. The other thing they heard was a complete buyout, Haymon and all. They were going to just take it over from the ground up. What they sort of alluded to was more of the first. It's more of the former. Was that it was purely more of a buyout of Waddell and Reed's investment, and then to become the majority investors of PBC and Haymon Sports LLC. And Haymon actually would stay on and run the company through Haymon Sports LLC still. I thought that was a really interesting point. On top of that, WME, William Morris Endeavor, is also looking into Top Rank. They did say, however, that there will be no sale, no buyout this year. WME is looking to do an IPO this year, and that's I forget the exact acronym, but basically they go public. They're a private company, and they're basically go public for a period of time to get a sort of investment of funds from stock buyers, because they would in that sense, going public would put your company on the stock market exchange, for those that don't know. And I think this is very interesting because, again, nothing is set in stone. Nothing's going to happen this year, so it's a far-off concept that we don't have to really delve too deeply in. However, this is interesting that WME is looking to sort of monopolize combat sports in some aspect, and PBC is the biggest, air quotes, promotional company in boxing. It has the deepest roster. It's probably worth the most as well. So it makes complete sense if you're WME that PBC would be a priority for you. On top of that, because they would lose structure, it might be easier to tap into and become the main investor of. And then to have this as a, sort of your portfolio after you become a publicly traded company. Again, so many moving parts. Check out that podcast. I'll post the link again in the chat for those that want to check it out. I highly recommend it. I haven't finished it yet, but the bit I have, I've listened to over 40 minutes of it. It was great. And again, Kurt, he's awesome. John is a fucking legend in the sport. Listen to this podcast. They will explain it better than I can. And plus, like I said, this is a thing that's not going to happen in the immediacy, so we can sort of start talking about it in depthly and do research on it. All of us can, and that's a great thing to do, like to have time to do the research and to sort of investigate it. I wanted to circle back, because again, if you haven't seen it, go check out the Boxing Esquire podcast on SoundCloud with John Nash and Kurt Emhoff. They did the episode, I think it was this week or last week. And talking about the rumors of the WME, William Morris Endeavor, buying PBC, in a sense, air quotes, buying. And those key points were buyout of Waddell and Reed's investment. Specifically, there are other conflicting rumors that say it's a total buyout, but they mainly dwelled on this aspect of it. So I think this is probably what they heard most of, was this structure. Al Haymon would stay on and still run the company through Haymon Sports LLC. WME also looking at Top Rank as well. No sale this year, And this part is why I wanted to bring up again, because this, I think, sort of confirms this rumor in some aspect. The reason why there was no sale this year is because WME wanted to go IPO this year. They wanted to be public so they can get a huge cash influx from the stock market. That is now official. They just released their S1 papers. I've yet to read them. I know like Jason Cruz, John Nash, they're on top of it already. So maybe I'll just wait and see what they sort of come with it instead of reading all that by myself. But that is a confirmation, again, of at least one aspect of this rumor. Is it a confirmation of all these aspects? No. But we do know that they are negotiating in some aspect with WME, Waddell Reed, and Al Haymon. To what extent, how much, we don't know, but we do know there are negotiations. We do know there have been feelers out to Top Rank and others in this IPO sort of confirmation by WME. Again, is perhaps a confirmation of this entire rumor. Rob, I've yet to really hear your thoughts on this. I know people have sort of heard my thoughts on it already, so I want to sort of give the floor to you. I'm going to shut up for once in my life. And I want to get your thoughts. Like, what do you think about this? Do you care? Sort of your entire thought process when you hear about these rumors.
Yeah, I mean, I believe they've kind of been rumblings for quite some time now. It's never really surfaced, and it's only obviously, properly come to a lot of more people's attention now. But I mean, it's interesting. It's there's having listened to the podcast myself, they were discussing, what if these come in and start really lowering the money that fighters are making? Will we see these fighters going elsewhere? There's talk that Haymon is sort of massively overpaid at times. Just different things like that. But I believe the talk is, if it's just buying out Waddell Reed, that leaves Al Haymon in place to continue as like the main guy at PBC or whatever.
The one still on the ground, sort of running the day to day.
Yeah. So I don't know. Only time will tell. I mean, I believe these guys also looked at Golden Boy at one point. I think that was mentioned in the podcast. So they're massively looking to try and get into boxing right now. And yeah, I don't see the landscape changing massively, unless they do come in. Obviously, they got the ties with the UFC. So whether they try to somehow base their input on the runnings of it like the UFC model. So does that mean a big pay cut? Or
I would argue though that PBC already kind of runs with the UFC model. Maybe not in terms of the inner workings of the business, but in terms of like production, the graphics are largely the same. Like you look at the UFC on Fox era and the PBC on Fox era, it's virtually the same. Like the sets are the same, the production quality is the same.
It being Fox though, maybe more than
could be
the input of the two other companies. Maybe It's, I don't know, but yeah, it'd be interesting to keep an eye on it. I'm sure more will come out as, like you say, one little piece of the puzzle has kind of happened. As far what did you say, the S1 papers or whatever?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but
I have no idea what it is, but I know that's a confirmation that they're going public.
Yeah, I was going to use that long word you just used to try and be funny, but I can't even remember it now.
What, nefarious?
That's it, yeah.
How would you use in that context?
I don't know. I was just going to say it for shits and giggles. But yeah, it's something, obviously, more and more will come out. But yeah, it'll be interesting. But do I see a lot changing? I don't know. I'm not sure. But because if Al Haymon's still in charge, it's still kind of going to be ran that way. Will it mean a whole bunch of extra funding? Will it not? Will fighters be paying less? I don't know. But this is all stuff that will eventually come out in the wash as they get further down the line with negotiations and potentially, completing this buyout. But it's interesting. I've seen a lot of the Twitter people. Some saying, "Oh, look, they're selling PBC," and no, they're not. It's that whole thing going on. It's quite funny, but I don't think much is going to change.
No, and Matthew in the chat, Matthew D'Souza, and also I think it was maybe Jay Willis saying, like, would this be good or bad for PBC? And he said surely good. And then Matthew D'Souza saying, Matt, what do you think? How will it affect boxing in your opinion? I think, like Rob said, this isn't really largely going to affect boxing, at least in the short term. For some content, calm down there, Rob. Got angry there. Relax. I think similar to how, let's say, the WME transitioned with Zuffa as the predominant owners of Zuffa and UFC, how that company changed its sort of daily operations. Not a lot changed. In fact, almost, I'm not going to say nothing changed because something's changed. They got rid of a lot of their executives within the company that were there to begin with and sort of put in their own guys. But a lot of it stayed the same. You know, maybe some of the matchmaking changed, maybe some of their international focus changed, but the sort of the ingredients of a UFC event did not change. Production did not change at all. And just connect that briefly to PBC and how it could affect it. I don't think PBC would change that much. I think Al Haymon would stay on. They would still sort of let Haymon run it, and they would just be the majority owners and be the sort of the investment of it, and they would just be the funds for PBC while they collect a check on it. And for your comment about pay, I don't think it should affect fighter pay at all, to be honest, because I don't think WME can somehow, affect fighter pay in PBC and make it somehow like UFC payout. Like, that just wouldn't happen due to some of the regulation on boxing, due to just some of the business of boxing, where a lot of these fighters aren't in contracts. So just because they buy PBC and that brand doesn't mean all of a sudden Danny Garcia, Deontay Wilder are in long-term contracts with rollover contracts and clauses that keep guys locked in. They don't have those predatory contracts as much as UFC contracts, right? And those wouldn't all of a sudden exist. Now, could they, through time, start to try to implement them? Maybe. But I still think fighter pay overall at the very top in boxing is going to be far better than UFC, and it's going to be that way for just the obvious reasons of the dichotomy of the industry, how it's so split up. There's so many different moving pieces that no one has a monopoly. Therefore, boxers have far more leverage in the negotiation table than UFC fighters. Because who are UFC fighters going to go to? Bellator? And get shown by a fraction of the people? Go to one championship in Asia? You know, there aren't really those other options for MMA fighters like there are for boxers. And that's why boxers can up their price so drastically. But again, I think this is largely good if it were to happen, because like Rob said, this would be at a huge influx of funds to PBC, and we've seen overall what the influx of a large amount of capital can do to the sport. It can improve it. I think we are better off today as a industry, as a community, than we were 10 years ago, when there were less options on the block, and those options had less money. So I'm all in favor of this. If it goes through, I think it would be a consolidation of combat sports properties under WME. That makes me concerned from a monopoly standpoint. But I mean, at this point, monopolization in sports entertainment and just entertainment as a whole is a fucking issue. So that's not isolated to this case at all. Look at fucking Disney and what they're doing.
Does this somehow, will this be maybe then PBC actually as a promotional company? Will they want to change in any way?
It could. For those that maybe don't
make Al Haymon a promoter, or
they talked about that before. In the lawsuits with the Golden Boy, I think it was Michael Ring was the person that disclosed this information. One of the people that was in the depositions, and just all those documents came out in the discovery process. He came out and said, look, the plan was long-term, Al Haymon would become a promoter. And this would be a league. Or the idea was either PBC would switch over to a promotional company, a true promotional company. Al Haymon would be the promoter, or they have the league, and that was always sort of a romanticized idea of what they could do. That Haymon would be a de facto commissioner, and they would run different promotions within that, including the big ones like Golden Boy, Matchroom. That was their sort of goal. Obviously, that didn't happen. Could that happen now? Maybe not so much as like a 1 + 2 = 3 process, Rob. Like it's not a linear connection between the sale of PBC to Al Haymon becoming a promoter or his role changing. But long term, absolutely, because that was always in the works. So with a huge amount of cash, maybe they sort of do some hostile takeovers of other promotion companies. Could they do that then? Maybe, because then it would be monopolized enough where Haymon could be the promoter and they don't have to do the league idea and have to work with everyone. But that would be, it would take a lot to get to that point.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that IFL video. Al Haymon with his banter, trying to come back at Eddie. That'd be good fun.
But then again, he could always do it like,
Al Haymon would do it like,
he could still be. Let's say if they ever want, let's say they monopolize and some of the competition, right? Let's say they gobbled up K2, main events, sort of the smaller promotions, right? Well,
yeah.
Sorry if that's like offensive, but it's just the truth.
No. Just go and have main events.
Maybe not the big ones like Golden Boy and Matchroom.
Yeah.
But the smaller ones, right? And then let's say they feel they have enough sort of market share, enough fighters in their stable that they could just be a promotion company at that point, and now Haymon becomes a promoter.
They have already, though, right?
No, they haven't done that, in my opinion.
They've got enough fighters, no?
Yeah, but I don't think they can make that switch yet. I think, yes, they are obviously the deepest talent pool and stable in boxing when it comes to a, air quotes, promotion, right? For argument's sake, we have to sort of classify PBC as a pseudo promotional company because that's what it compares to. But I think if Haymon ever became a promoter, he still probably wouldn't be the point man. He would still have somebody else go on stage and talk, just like the Fertittas had with Dana White. Dana White had with Dave Schaller for a period of time when Dana White was going through his health issues, and he had Dave Schaller as their PR guy, always go out there.
And tell me Dana White still doesn't have health issues. Get out of here. He must have. I think Al Haymon does it like
quickly, because I know you made a joke, but he had like actual surgery on like he had like something wrong with his ear, like his inner ear, like almost like an equilibrium thing. So he had like a couple surgeries and shit to try to fix that. So he was gone for a period of time. Dave Schaller came in and was like the PR guy. Anyways, I know you were making jokes.
It wasn't like cholesterol related or anything like that.
No, it wasn't PED related.
Okay. What about Al Haymon does it like a Force Ghost? That's how he does his interviews, I think.
I'm down with that.
Really dark,
Yeah.
That'd be good. That'd be pretty funny. But yeah, what's next?